Okay. This is our second time with PauHana Saturday, and I was lucky enough to get Natalie Dunbar with us. I actually met, oh, hi, Natalie. Say hi. I actually met Natalie when we did the conference. Actually, it was one of the last conferences before the virus took over, right, Natalie?
Yep.
Right.
The World IA Conference,
Yep.
which was interesting because the Los Angeles event was actually in my town of Pasadena.
Pasadena.
Very convenient. You had to fly in, though. I
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that was very interesting. I woke up really, really early, did the family thing, then I flew out and hopped from Uber to over there and got lost on
Found your way.
everything, found my way, met Natalie, she did a great presentation and stuff. We just started talking, and then later on, I think it was a couple weeks ago, I had asked Natalie to come on our podcast because she brought up really, really great tips about content strategy. And actually, what is content strategy? She's the expert in that field. So basically, this was just really a short notice. I asked Natalie yesterday if she would like to, come on and just talk to whoever would, come on. So Natalie G. And basically, as you were saying earlier, she is learning UX UI, and her background is doing illustration. And you can definitely package your whole illustration with UI and UX for sure.
I hope so.
But because not every designer knows how to draw. I mean, they might know how to draw a little bit, but not how the way you know how to draw, how to put things together with the colors, the gradients, the, small things. Natalie, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you can just introduce yourself just a little bit.
Oh, let's see if I can remember what it is that I do. It's Sunday, so I'm just like, I was it was either this or I was going to binge watch the what is it, the Last Dance.
I've been watching.
Our household is missing basketball around here. We're Lakers fans, so my son and I, and I'm just like, I need some basketball. But I'm a content strategist. I work in user experience design. I like to say I'm not a copywriter, but I do write copy if I have to. That's kind of where I started. I was I was a lot of things, but my first writing job was as a marketing communication specialist for Farmers Insurance a long, long time ago. And I I always dreamed to be a journalist, and I did the marketing communications thing, but Farmers had a tuition assistance kind of thing, so I got my certification in journalism from UCLA.
Oh, nice.
Added with I have a degree in sociology and criminal justice from Rutgers from way back in the day. But, it's funny because social science did not figure into the plans I had. At least I didn't think they did. Mm-hmm. And then now it's like everything that I do is to understand the mental models of groups of users. So I would say my parents are probably happy that I'm finally using my degree, but I went for marketing communications, did a stint in journalism. I was always curious about the digital worlds. I'm a little older, so, I was hand coding back in the day. I would just go into websites and try to figure out how to make stuff blink or whatever it was. And all of those things converged into my first real digital role at a large company was at yellowpages.com. I was a senior writer. Well, I was an editorial producer first, then a senior writer. Then I was a product manager. Then I was a user researcher. And then I got laid off. And I was like, but what do I do now? And I kept seeing this content strategy. I'm like, well, I know how to do all the things, and it's kind of like what we were talking about before you started recording. I didn't know how to package them. Mm-hmm. But when you get laid off, all of a sudden it's like you start learning. And sure enough, I just started to rework my resume. I started learning as much as I could, and online learning was pretty vibrant. That was 2013. It's not like what we have now, but it was still, I could go and work on skills. I was out of work for a year. I did, short-term assignments here and there. And then I got ad agency from downtown LA found me on LinkedIn, and they had a project where they needed a content strategist. And I'm like, okay. And I ended up working there first as a contractor. I left for a minute, and then they hired me back. And we won awards for our web design, redesign work. And I would say for all the designers out there, if you work with, even if the person doesn't have the title content strategy, but you work with a digital content person, join yourselves at the hip. I learned so much from the designers that I've worked with. I can't draw stick figures, so that's the extent of my creative ability in visual design. But I have learned over the years what works for users. Content is not just words to me. Everything that creates the experience out there in the digital world is content. Every piece of it, every button, every color, everything. So how do those things work together to make, like we talked about at the IA conference, how do those things work together to make sense of information spaces, right? So that's the really short version. Well, maybe not. That's the Sunday second
version.
cup of coffee version.
That's great. That's great. So like you were talking about blending all your talents and everything like that. So what was of your process for that? Or did you even have one? Or did you just kind of happen organically, I guess?
I think I was so curious about what all these different roles were when I started at Yellow Pages. I had worked at a small nonprofit before that, and I was what they called a web administrator, and it was only because I knew how to hand code that I made like an online journal for their, like I had to hand code a journal for people to go in and be able to, like, it was like really rudimentary. It's not like what we have now, but it was the first interactive, it was a faith-based organization. So I literally had to, like, there's a Bible website that I had to hand code every day where people could go in and like write their notes or whatever. But then we did a web redesign, and I mean, we're talking about a 25-page church website that tripled to 75 pages.
Wow.
But we also made it interactive, and we also made it where like people could pay for like workshops and different things online. We were kind of at the forefront of doing that with that organization, and I worked with the company that we hired to actually do the coding and everything. So developers and product managers. I had never heard of those roles before. So when I went to Yellow Pages, I was so green, but I was really, really curious, which always gets me in trouble. And I think that was what made me a good journalist for the time that I wore that hat, is I was always curious. And I always wanted a job where I could work on the internet. So there I was, and I just started asking questions. And then I found the places where I fit. When we were just coming on, we were talking about, G was talking about how to, like, certain things haven't come together with certain industries and that kind of thing. I mentioned that I was a product manager for a minute. I pushed for that. So I went from editorial producer to senior writer, and I wanted to be a product manager so bad. And I pushed and I pushed and I pushed, and it ended up being the worst 2 years of my life. Same organization, but it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I probably could go back and be a lot better at it now than I was then. But it was because what you were saying, Terri, I didn't allow things to happen organically.
Yep.
So once I let go of the reins, so to speak, and just figured out, you know, where do I fit into this whole technology structure, this whole product management structure, as, you know, we borrow our terms from new product development and, you know, all things development. And content strategy gave me the opportunity to call on my editorial and copy expertise, but to take it beyond that to a point where I can't draw or illustrate anything, but I know what works. And
Right.
so, and I can sit down at a table with a wow, it's Sunday. I can't think of words today. With a
That's
a
okay.
cross-functional team, and I can talk to a developer and make sense and understand mostly what they're saying. I can talk to UX designer. I can talk to an IA. All the different pieces
Hmm.
of what all what it takes to either make an app or a site or whatever digital experience we're building. So I just kind of, it's funny, I just found this little comic that I've had for years. You're not going to be able to see it, but it's like, it's really old and yellowed. And
Yes.
it says, silence is never more golden than when you keep it long enough to get all the facts. And that's been my motto for my life since I found that comic, which I cut it out. And my son was like 2 and he's like 30 now. So that's how long I've had that. And I
That's awesome.
just sat and listened. That's the best skill ever.
I'm so happy you brought that up because most people have a tendency, like, they keep forcing it. Well, this and that, and they keep going and going. And they're trying to get a circle into a square.
Yeah.
Anytime when that happens, everybody needs just to pull back and really think,
Yep.
okay, what's not working? How is
Right.
not working? And figure out a way to kind of go through it. And basically, as you said earlier, happen organically, because when you like, okay, maybe it's not the right time. I'm just going to do more research because as designers, we need to research more. If something
Hmm.
is not clear to us, research, find out more, connect with people, start talking to people. And the more you talk, that's when I always like to think it's San Francisco. It's very, very foggy. And then all of a sudden the rainbow kind of comes out,
Hmm.
right? You're like,
Hmm.
oh, that's what they meant, and
Hmm.
that's when things will start to happen a little bit more organically. And
Yeah.
do you have any
It,
questions about how to like blend stuff in or?
well, you talked about the worst 2 years to push to be the product manager, and
Hmm.
because you didn't let things go organically.
Hmm.
But at the same time, at the moment, it's very hard to know, like, if you let that go and then you feel like if that the result is not the way you want it, maybe now you're thinking, oh, maybe I pushed more, which is the other way.
Hmm.
So how would you figure out, like, which one?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky because I ended up working with a manager who he pushed me technically in a way that hurt my brain. But at the same time, saw he was able to see where my potential was, even though I was miserable. And it was because like I said, I pushed for the role because, I thought it was somehow, it would be taken more seriously than, oh, you're just a writer, which was what I would get a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked with content strategists way back then. They were from Sapient, bless their hearts. And they made us feel like as writers that we hadn't evolved somehow. So I was like, well, I want to be in a role where somebody can respect what I do. I have this brain that kind of thinks, I'm comfortable with technology, blah blah blah. But the harder, and then there was a situation where I had a director that had kind of promised some things that it ended up not panning out, and it was just kind of a mess. Had I stayed in a writing role, I probably would have eventually ended up being a manager or something like that, and would have pushed for that for the content roles to be taken more seriously. That's not what ended up happening, but I did have a manager who became a mentor. And that was one of the things that I think, to answer your question more directly, is that I just kept what does Mr. Rogers say? Look for the helpers. I kept looking for the people who wanted to help me. Like, I would talk to people and I would be honest and say, oh, you're a product manager now. How does that feel? I'm like, it's not what I thought it was going to be. And I don't know what to do about it. And they were like, what do you like to do? What do you, so on and so forth. And it was just trial and error. Eventually that same manager that I had that pushed me so much technically had a conversation with another director who was in user experience. And he's like, she's got great people skills. She's got great content skills. At that time, they had asked me to, as a product manager, lead a usability community online, or a user community online. So it was an online community, but it wasn't for like just chatting and that kind of thing. We were putting out like prototypes and different things. This was before usertesting.com came along. And we were using the community to do usability research so we could get beyond our offices in Glendale, California, where we had people come into our usability lab. We could get people online to sign up. We kind of gamified the thing a little bit where, they could win stuff, whatever. But because of that and because of my interaction with users, they were like, let's bring this under the user research umbrella, and then let's teach her how to do research in the lab. And so it kind of came full circle, because doing research in the lab is like being a journalist. You observe, you listen, and then you summarize what you saw. It was like, oh, okay, this is perfect. So then coming back around to, I wasn't formally trained as a usability researcher. So when I was laid off, it was like, what is the thing that I was trained in? I was trained in, in writing and journalism. So how can I put all that together? And I just kept blending skills and, repurposing my resume and tailoring it to different jobs. And when I started talking about content strategy, that's when I started to get little nibbles. And I absolutely love what I do. I actually teach yoga part-time, because why not? And I keep saying, oh, I'm gonna become a content strategy consultant. I'm gonna do more yoga full time. And yeah, it's not happening like that, because I still love so much what I do. So yeah, it's listening to what little things not keep you up at night in a bad way, but like what excites you, like, what, and then how do you find places to make it fit? How do you, like, I read job descriptions all the time, because sometimes what they call a content administrator, which is really a content strategist, or they'll call it a content marketing. It's really content strategy. It's like, I just want to see what the skills are that people are looking for all the time, because you never know when the next layoff or whatever, especially in these times, right? So what can I say? I can't say anything in 2 words, but I can say 2 words for this. Stay curious. Always. That's the key. Just stay curious.
I like that.
Yeah. So I don't know if I answered the question. I really tried. Apparently my brain on Sunday is just like, blah, blah, blah.
You did.
Yeah. I mean, most people on Sundays, they don't do these kind of things. But then again, I always think, Sundays is a good time just to, be together, network, ask questions, and you learn too.
And you're more relaxed, I mean, if it's this or binge watching Netflix, so I figure, why not this? Keep my brain, keep things going.
Again, what kind of value we can bring to people? How can I say this? I guess what can be your superpower per se? What kind of content? So mine is, I like to bring people together. I like, oh, what are you working on? And really listen. It's like, oh, you know what? You should talk to this person because that person has that. And just like mix people, because the more we mix with our skills, then we are teaching them, but they're also teaching us.
Yep. You're really good at that, Terry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am learning. I can't. If Terry emails me, yes, I'll figure out the rest later. Okay. But it helps me come out of my comfort zone.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, you can even ask my family. You can even ask my husband. I will make a total jack a donkey out of myself. I really don't care. Because you just never know who you're going to meet or like who you're going to make that comment to, because maybe that other person is like having a bad day, or maybe they're going through something traumatic that maybe we don't know about, because everybody is fighting some type of mental health, whatever it is. And maybe they don't want to reach out. Maybe they're just having a real bad day, and just by one of us saying, hey, how you doing? And really be present. And when we're present, we can switch their thought differently in a second. And people don't realize how powerful that is.
I think, not that we're talking about the pandemic, but it's definitely changed things for everybody.
Yeah.
It has, like, I had to learn. So I mentioned that I teach yoga part-time. I teach privates one-on-one. So I have like 6 clients that I work with on a weekly basis. And everybody, every other yoga teacher out there, full-time, part-time, studio, whatever, they were jumping online. And I had to step back a minute and think about it. I was like, hold on. I'm online for my work 8 to 10 hours a day. Do I really want to be online for another 2 hours, like staring at a screen? And I had to balance that with the fact that, like I said, I'm curious. So I'm like, oh, now I have time to take this online course, and I have the time to do that, and blah, 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 blah. So I took a step back and kind of did an assessment of like what I really wanted to focus on. And I'm in the camp of, it doesn't matter if you during the pandemic sit and watch Netflix every day or night or whatever, as long as you're surviving, that's good. But the connection piece is what I miss the most. And so when I get in a funk, and even when I see like all of, a lot of people like, oh, I'm not working, I don't have this, I don't have that, I'm bored, I've, watched 18 movies, and I'm over here like teaching yoga online, and like nothing's changed for me, except I can't go outside, but, well, I can, but not without, the whole mask and the whole bit. But what I saw happening, which changed my mindset from like, oh, woe is me, everybody else is out there, I mean, it's not great to be not working if you had a job, but, all of a sudden everybody's got all this time on their hands, and I'm, busting my butt. But then I started seeking out more connection. I started like looking for, well, now that I do have time, maybe I don't want to be online all day, but I'd like to go to this webinar, or I'd like to check out that webinar. And it gives me ideas for maybe topics I might like to write about, topics I might like to speak about. You just gave me you gave me an idea, Terry, when we first met, about maybe doing a content strategy course online. And much to my dismay, I'm surprised there's not really like in any of the there aren't any.
No, I told you. Did I not tell you? Did I not tell you?
When I built my first content strategy practice, and when I say that, I mean they didn't have one at the agency that hired me. And after we had our first successful client interaction and website builds, they brought on other clients, and they were selling them on content strategy, and we were signing contracts based on that. And it was like, okay, I had to like literally had a stack of books where I was learning as I was going. Yeah. And I was afraid, and I know we probably all know about, imposter syndrome. I was like, they're going to find me out. They're going to fire me. They're going to let me go. But I got in a room with lead visual designer. He was the digital creative director and the lead UX guy. And we had an IA that was like an intern. And we literally on a whiteboard on all 4 walls in the room mapped out the content strategy life cycle and how it interacts with the rest of our site definition process. And I was able to replicate that at every organization I've gone to since, which has only been two, Kaiser Permanente and and Anthem. But, Anthem has a pretty robust content strategy guild, so to speak. There's a lot of us there. And we all define it as something different, but, we all come together and we have similar problems and things that we share about. But yeah, making the connections, those are the things, and the things like what you're saying about seeking out positivity, seeking out, not necessarily like-minded people, yes, but I'm always looking for the ones that are like, there's maybe one or two things that I read about a webinar or, some kind of social meetup online that I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about Adobe XD, but I'd like to. So I'm going to take this class and sign up, which I did that a couple weekends ago. So
nice.
Yeah, it's just making the connections and, like I said, again, staying curious. I feel like I'm rambling. I'm going to stop talking now.
I have a question about your more details about your job, content strategy, and it's pretty new concept for me.
Mm-hmm.
I understand general concept from the word, but you talked about when you were doing interview, I guess, writing all content strategies life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What is it like?
So our goal as content strategists is to help pull together all the elements of a digital experience to help the user through the funnel, whether it's to play a video game or to sign up for healthcare. Mm-hmm. There's that, that marketing funnel. So when people are just kind of up here at the top and they're curious, we want to make sure we bring together all the elements that are needed, the words, the pictures, the colors, everything, to help those people get to the decision point so we can get that conversion, right? So we start with words, but we touch a lot of other things. Because sometimes a block of text is going to be a turnoff to someone, whereas a short video clip might do a better job at explaining, right? That'll pull people in more. I always use that example because we find that from when I used to work on higher education websites, these departments will want to write this long, paragraph about our department and blah, blah, blah. And students don't care. They want to hear from other students. They want to hear from other people that look like them. What is the value that they're getting out of whatever engagement? So that was that's the high level. On the day-to-day, in my current role, I do a lot with information architecture. So working with navigation structures, everything from where things live in navigation to what we call the things. I can share a link to, I think I uploaded an audio version of my IA talk, my World IA Day talk to YouTube, because I don't think they ever got a chance. Terri, do you know if they got a chance to upload our talks?
Good question.
I know they were supposed to because they asked us to record them.
Yeah.
And I recorded mine and I sent it, but I never saw it. But anyway, I made the recording in QuickTime, so that's something that might be kind of useful, for you to kind of check out. I'll figure out a link. I'll send it to Terri, and because I don't know where it is right now. But from the day-to-day, it's, it is working a lot with copy. Sometimes I do a little bit of writing. I do a lot less writing in my career right now than I ever have, which is okay with me. I mean, on the side, I write all the time. But in my current role, we are about content reuse. So write once, use often, use in different places. So in my current role, we have different markets that we build websites specifically for Anthem providers. So for doctors and their, admins, to learn about how to code this particular bill and, that kind of stuff. Doesn't sound all that exciting, but it's cool. Where it varies is that from state to state or market to market, there are different regulations, and some states' departments of health are, because it's highly regulated because it's Medicaid. I forgot to mention that. And as an aside, I don't know what it is about every content strategy job, every content job I've had has been in a highly regulated space. So
Mm-hmm.
even yellowpages.com, they were owned by AT&T. And, telecom is quite regulated, a lot more now than it was then, which is why they kept having issues. But anyway, not us, but yeah, AT&T, data, all that stuff. But yeah, I've always worked with like healthcare, financial institutions, higher ed, so there's a lot of regulation there. But what we like to be able to do is there's like 5 phases of content strategy that are replicable. So this is that life cycle I was talking about. So it's like define, design. It depends on which model you're looking at. There's integration or something like that, where the actual writing and everything comes together. And then there's launch, and then there's the optimization step, where after you've done the legwork of the defining of what it is that you're trying to create, whether it's an experience, product, service, your basic content strategy always starts with an inventory and an audit. And I always like to say that's where the heavy lifting happens. So in the inventory, it's quantitative. How much content do we have, and where does it live? And it usually is a list of URLs, or it could be screens if it's a mobile thing, right? And then from that, we do a qualitative. So that's where my user experience brain comes in, right? So how much content do we have? Where does it live? How well is it performing? Is there a future state that we're trying to get to? So you might ask, well, why in the heck would you look at what you have to try to figure out whether it measures against future state? Well, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? If we have stuff that works, let's optimize it. If we discover a gap, maybe there's a new business goal that the business has come up with that they want to hit, a KPI or something. Does our content help to get to that goal? So you can measure, the accuracy, not the accuracy, the quality of the content in that way. So we do the audit, the inventory to find out how much we have. We do an audit to see how well it matches whatever current or future state goals. Then we figure out where we have gaps, and then that's where we ask for new content to be created, new copy to be created. Mm-hmm. We also might need new design. We might need new development mm-hmm. to help support that goal. Usually we're, as content strategists, a lot of times we're the last to know that something's happening, and somebody will be like, oh, we built this thing, we need you to write words. And it's like, hold on, time out. What is it? What does it do? Who is it for? So on and so forth. So we ask the same questions that our design partners, that our product partners, we ask the same questions. And then we go off and figure out, do we have what it takes to create that experience where people are going to convert and do whatever it is that they want to do? That's kind of the Sunday afternoon content strategy one-on-one talk.
So for you, like using words for each app, especially like, I guess for pharmaceutical stuff, it needs to be very like straightforward and accurate, whatever, with specific terminology and that kind of thing. But also, I guess, like depends on the target users. The terms and words are going to be different. Yeah. Is it like part of your job as well?
Yes, voice and tone is how we talk about it.
Right.
And there's voice and tone that is more the editorial, traditional way we think of voice and tone. When I talk about voice and tone from content strategy, the voice is usually the brand voice, like the official way the brand talks about itself. Okay. The tone is how the different users that we've defined by creating personas usually, and what we know about our user base, how do they talk about the brand or the product or the service? So we have to find a way to blend those. So you might think, oh, Anthem is creating websites for doctors, there's going to be a lot of medical speak. we found in our research that the people who use those provider websites more are really their admins. It's not the doctors. They don't have time. So they're telling their admins, I need you to go, file this claim. I need you to do this, research on this patient or whatever. So we have to strike a balance where we have our regulated content, but it's represented in a way that the primary users can understand it. And the primary users, again, are not always the physicians themselves or the providers themselves. It's their office staff. So, and you can only find stuff out like that about, when you do research, right? So that balance between the business goals and the user needs, that's a line that we walk every single day, trying to figure out. And we sit around tables as design and content and whatever professionals. There are no users at the table with us. So somebody's got to advocate for the user. And it's usually the designers and the content people. Because they know that what a person encounters on the other end of a screen or a phone or, whatever, that impact is it gonna measure up to meet the needs of that user at that moment. So what happens on the other side of the screen when somebody sees our beautiful designs and our lovely pros that we're written, if they're not signing up for or doing whatever action, that the call to action is, coming down to that, we talk about content hierarchy. So kind of like the same thing with journalism. There's like a nut graph. It's like the important stuff is up top. So all the stuff in the middle, if what we want them to do is click that button, let's make it easy for them to get there. Let's not put a bunch of interactions and stuff that takes them off the page and so on and so forth. Let's get them to where they want to go with as little friction as possible. And that is ultimately the goal of content strategy. But that's also the shared goal of good user experience, I think. Yeah. But that's just me.
How can you find the balance between you want the users to push that button, but at the same time you need to give the users enough information, so but you don't want to be too wordy or too graphic, there should be a balance.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is that there are so many studies and groups out there that produce research on that kind of thing, like the Norman Nielsen group and, usertesting.com, like that information is out there. Mm-hmm. So we can make some assumptions about what research is already available, and then kind of extrapolate that and apply it to our business and our users. We have to make some assumptions, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the beautiful thing about when we get to the optimization phase of the content strategy lifecycle, is that, and especially with like content management systems that allow you to, publish right on the spot, right? We don't have to wait for a code push. We can maybe do some A/B testing. Maybe we labeled a button, sign up on for some users, but maybe it's, start now for others. I don't know which one's performing better. We can actually measure all that stuff now. So what was it on Friday? There was a bunch of content strategists on a call and we were all geeking out over data. It's like, well, yeah, it's great that the business wants to take, a certain page from this part of the navigation and put it over here. But A, the mental model from the research that we have doesn't support that. B, can we do some more updated research to see, like, even if it's just a simple card sort, to figure out, hey, if you were looking for this information and this was your navigation, where would you expect to find it? Simple as that. Give me 5 people. Give me 10. I don't care. Right? And sometimes we have to go rogue like that. We might ask people those questions that are not physicians, because people still have a shared way that they process information, right? It's a common way that we process information. So that's why I say content strategy is so much more than writing, because it is. It really requires understanding the business goals and the user needs. And that's how you just keep at it. It's not a one and done process. It's a life cycle. So it keeps going and going. And in that process, you might pull content that, because you know from your analytics, not necessarily that the time on page is short, because that's no longer a good metric to measure. Sometimes people spend a short time on a page because they found what they wanted and they bounce to the next thing because you've given them what they want. So that's a really tricky measurement to interpret. But sometimes you just don't get the clicks that you think you're going to get just from somebody just going to the page, or you see where they go next and it's like, oh, we don't need this content. Nobody's using it. So you're constantly looking. What do we call it? It's a ROT score. It's a redundant, outdated, or trivial. So if we find that stuff is redundant, outdated, or trivial, it goes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a lot to digest. Sorry.
No.
Sorry, not sorry.
No. I think it's really good. The more we, as designers, the more we understand of what other people's roles are, I think that is extremely helpful, but not only helpful, but actually important, because when you look at it at a team, stakeholders, everybody has a very important role to play.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And a lot of that, again, is based on listening.
Yeah.
G asked, how do you find that balance between, what works for the business and what works for the users? And it's stakeholder and user interviews. That's the way to go. You can do it. You can be rogue as you need to be. I've gone out with a UX designer and done man and woman on the street interviews, or we sat outside of, what was it? One of the medical groups. That was the project that they brought me on for at the agency, is a public health agency called LA Care. And there's one in every county in California where it's more of a public health type plan. And we would watch people as they go in and out and say, hey, we're working on this website. Do you have a minute? We got a $5 Starbucks card for you, and, are you a member of this? And, how do you use the website? How often do you go on it? And you'd be surprised about what people will tell you. One other thing I'd like to say about staying curious is, there is no shame in my game. I will ever so often hop on usertesting.com as a tester.
That's what I do too.
Not on the other side. And that has helped me. Mind you, I build up a little fun cash too, because they pay $10 for each test that you successfully complete. So I get a little mad money so I can buy more coffee. But I love being on the side of the user because I always learn something.
Mm.
Yep.
Always learn something. And it's worth my time to spend 10 or 15 minutes on a website or on a mobile app to put myself in the mindset of a user. I think everything that I've done in my career as a content strategist thus far, you're going to laugh at this. I've tried to create templates for presenting content strategies, so it's uniform and it looks nice and the whole bit. And so we kind of have a united front when we go to present to different parts of the organization. The most important slide to me is not the one that explains content strategy. It's the one that puts the personas in front of the whatever audience. Because at the end of the day, if you forget them, stop working. If you don't consider who you're creating, whatever you're creating for, then what's the point of what we're doing? It's like just talking into a vacuum, right? Mm-hmm. So I always want to put the personas or whatever information we know about the users front and center. And what helps me to remember to do that is to put myself in the role of that person so I can be their advocate, so I can be the voice of the user, and not voice of the consumer like online communities, although that is helpful, but being the voice of the consumer, the user that we're trying to reach, and putting myself in that mental model constantly so I know what works and what doesn't. Like I have to think in a different way when I go and volunteer to do user testing. Like I can't think like I know what what I know. I have to put myself in that mindset. And it really is a good way to constantly stay on top of whatever part of the experience design process that you're in. It helps you have that empathy for the user.
How do you research about your user? For example, like I'm working on a surfing web right now, surfing app, and I'm not a surfer. I have no one around me who's surfing. Maybe tried one time like 10 years ago, maybe just interested in someday dreaming. Otherwise, I have nobody who's
right.
I don't know how to reach them. And I think another app that is in the program is tattoo app. If I went there, the same thing. I don't know who's interested in tattoo around me. I've seen enough people who's has tattoo, but it's just I've seen them. Nobody is like my friends, or I can them and understand them like in personal way for their choice.
Right.
So for those kind of things, how do you research about them?
So I'm assuming that there's no user research budget for either of these, or is there a user research department for the things that you're working on, or no?
Well, it's for my homework. So
okay.
There's no.
Okay. So, okay, that helps. There's a thing that I used to say, and I think I might have mentioned this at the IA conference. When I was writing as a journalist, the research writes the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So get curious. I bet if you go online and you search, surfer demographics, if you just put those two words in there, you're going to start finding information. You're definitely going to go down a rabbit hole of, oddball stuff that you probably don't need, but you're going to learn a lot about who either your audience is or could be. I would guess that maybe are demographics part of your homework, or do you have to figure that out?
I had to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. So again, putting yourself into the mindset of the user. I've done this when I was working at the agency. The lead UX designer and myself would go off in a room with our laptops and just like surf the web, because maybe we were building a website for, what was it, like electrical engineering students. I don't know anything about electrical engineering, but I just started searching, and we would sit at a table and we're like, what did you find? What did you find? And then we start finding common threads. If you're building an app for surfing, I know my son's a surfer and he has a tattoo. So there you go. I wish he was here. But I know that there's apps where I think they can go and like find wave conditions. How high are the swells? I only know a little bit about surfing, not much. How high are the swells, this and that. You got to go online and do the research. You don't necessarily have to have, keywords or whatever. Just be curious about the subject matter. Same thing with tattoo. I have no clue about, I've always wanted one, but I don't have one yet. Maybe now is not the time to get one, but I've always, wondered about, kind of, so use your own curiosity Like, start from the place where you said, hey, maybe, I'm not a surfer, but I thought maybe, a while ago that would be a dream that I would have. Start from that place. Start from that curiosity and let that lead you down the research path to then where you start seeing patterns. What do you do with those patterns? Well, it depends on what you're building. It depends on what you're creating. Figure out who you're creating it for, or see who's out there in the general surfing population and figure out what their need is. Because, they might even not even, we can get all Apple about it. They might not even know that they need, and they don't know that they need an iPhone, but whatever. But we're going to give it to them anyway.
Well, that was another thing that I found during the research, and exactly, they don't know what's wrong and they don't know what they need. They are just happy with what they got, and if I bring up something, then oh yeah, that'd be nice. Oh yeah, I haven't thought about it. But it's very hard to get, what's the problem? What kind of complaint
right
we have with the existing app or web or whatever.
Well, so that's the other part of the research, right? Is competitive analysis. So what products or services are out there that are similar to or like what you're creating, right? Maybe there isn't one, but maybe there's something that's similar. Or maybe there's something from another sport that's kind of, more obscure and whatever. Not saying that surfing is obscure, but it's definitely its own thing based on, it's like its own mindset. I think it's more aloha spirit than anything. But there's a certain, to me and now that I'm more into living my yoga and that kind of thing, which is an odd balance with technology, but it works for me. Anything works for me.
Nothing is odd. Nothing is odd.
Right? It all works together. But I know that, from living my yoga and being around more people who are into surfing and yoga and that kind of thing, technology doesn't always appeal. It's like, oh, that's, I don't know if I want to be all in this technology stuff. But if you can, maybe somebody who knows somebody who surfs, do a survey monkey. Throw out some questions. Go on your Facebook. You have to go rogue and just figure out the questions that you want to ask and who you want to ask them to, and figure out. Technology does allow us, social media and all this stuff allows us so many different ways to be able to find information. It's beyond the Google search. It's like you can find so many tools to help you, like do surveys and stuff.
Yeah.
You just get creative with it. Yeah.
Go to Instagram. Find out who are the surfers, who are the workout people, and you just mention them. Say, hey, I really like this picture, XYZ, and is it okay if I ask you 3 questions?
Yep.
And
so
99 out of 10, they'd be like, okay.
We call that social listening, right? So you go to the places in social media where the people you're trying to find are.
I do that all the time. Do
a hashtag search, and you'll find people on Twitter. You'll find people on Insta. That's excellent. Have we blown your brain up yet? Now I want to go work.
You can't work on a Sunday.
I don't want to binge watch the rest of The Last Dance. Now I want to go work.
That's funny. Okay, right now I'm definitely gonna end it here. So thank you, everybody, but don't go away. But anyway, I'm just gonna end